After the end of the world, Zou Yan, who lived in comfortable conditions, naturally became a hunting target for the familiar people around him. Zou Yan, who originally wanted to spend his whole life in a warm shelter, had to urgently take action to stop the killing. Little brother. Are you there? Little brother. Do you think my posture looks good? Boss. This box of rice seems to be wrong. Yesterday, there was fish and meat in this box of rice. But why is there only so little today? Chapter 1. The gear of fate starts to rotate again. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the 10th year of the sewage discharge from the foot-pot chicken nucleus into the sea, in the largest seafood market in Binhai City, China, a handsome and slender young man holding an umbrella is shopping for various fresh seafood with nuclear radiation at the booth. The young man's name is Zou Yan, and he is a social animal. Today is his first day of rebirth from the end of the world. The rain has been drizzling down for a month. The murky water on the ground has become rampant in the seafood market. Zou Yan was hesitating as he pulled through a pile of mutated fish emitting a foul smell and asked, "Boss, how much does this fish cost?" The owner of the fish stall is a middle-aged fat man. While he takes one of his feet out of the sewage, he silently curses at this damn weather. Look for yourself. Isn't it written all over there? The middle-aged fat man angrily glanced at Zou Yan, leaned against his tricycle loaded with fish, and then rubbed his toes with his fingers. Obviously, the anger of this fisherman did not come from Zou Yan. His hazy eyes, as if he had jaundice, looked desperately at the dim sky and cursed an extremely unpleasant national curse. Zou Yan ignored this swearing fish guy. At this moment, he just wants to finish buying groceries quickly and go back to the company. Today is August 10th, which used to be the hottest season in China in previous years. However, the climate this year is very abnormal. As soon as August enters, the temperature drops all the way. Until today, the temperature has dropped to the lowest temperature in the same period since the meteorological records in Binhai City. Zou Yan turned his head to look at the price list that Yulao had pre-placed in the water. He saw that the price of Shanghai fish was calculated based on the amount of radiation emitted by the fish. The lower the radiation, the more expensive the price. Conversely, the opposite was true. What kind of fish is the cheapest? Zou Yan asked calmly. Yulao may have never seen a customer like Zou Yan before. He stopped cursing and glanced at Zou Yan with a serious expression in surprise. Eat it yourself. If you eat it yourself, I advise you to buy something more expensive instead. No. I don't eat it myself. I bought it specifically for my enemies to eat. You can see that the fisherman was clearly stunned for a moment. If that's the case, then I won't advise you. The fish man asked Zou Yan how many fish he wanted to buy, and then began to put fish in plastic bags. Zou Yan estimated the number of people in the company and said to Yulao, "Choose the 8 largest ones for me." Zou Yan actually had a dislike for those people in his company at first. But in his previous life, he completely saw through the fierce faces of those people. The thought of being eaten one by these people made him shudder. After buying the fish, Zou Yan carried a plastic bag and ran towards the outside of the market. The water is muddy and cool. If it weren't for the weather, Zou Yan wouldn't have been able to get this job today. The person in charge of purchasing in the company is the boss's sister.in.law. During this period, because the boss's sister.in.law is pregnant, all her work can only be taken on by Zou Yan. I remember the first time Zou Yan went to buy groceries on her behalf, the boss's sister.in.law sat behind his desk and scolded him, "Don't think about making money. I know much more about the prices of vegetables and meat in Binhai City than you do. If you dare to play tricks, I'll let my brother.in.law take you away." Zou Yan's lips showed a cold and sarcastic smile. In fact, as a reincarnated person, he knew many people's secrets, including the boss's sister. Law. The boss's sister. Law not only occupies the purchasing gap in the company, but also embezzles a lot of money from the company for several years. The most important thing is that the child she is pregnant with is not her husband's. Zou Yan, who was reborn, only survived for 100 days in the apocalypse. And in these 100 days, he deeply experienced the cruelty of human nature. After being reborn, he swore to take back all the things he had lost before, and to let those who had hurt him receive the punishment they deserve. Ah! When will this rain come down? I've lived for so long, and I've never seen the heavens rain for such a long time before. From afar, Zou Yan heard an old lady with white frost on her temples complaining to another old lady in the rain curtain by the roadside. Yeah. The climate is getting more and more abnormal now. My daughter called and said that many places over there have already been flooded by heavy water. It's better for us here. Although it rained for a long time, it didn't cause floods. Zou Yan threw the sea fish onto the car, then opened the door and sat in the car. Looking at the hazy drizzle outside the car and the hurried pedestrians, Zou Yan fell into a deep fear of the future apocalyptic life. To be honest, in order to survive in the apocalypse, Zou Yan must store enough food and drinking water, as well as warm clothing and shelter to protect himself from being harmed by his own kind. Because Zou Yan knew that rain was only temporary, and in 30 days, when the rain suddenly stopped, the end of humanity would also come. The temperature will plummet from -15 degrees Celsius to over -40 degrees Celsius in just one day after the rain stops. At this time, most people in the world will lose their lives in this sudden ice age. In his previous life, Zou Yan survived the first wave of cold waves and successfully survived. But he still underestimated the evil in human nature. Just when he thought he could survive this disaster, he was ambushed by the people he had helped before. When he died, he was filled with resentment and unwillingness. After his rebirth, he still retained all the memories of the previous life before his death in his mind. Zou Yan has always been a kind-hearted person, whether in school or at work. The only principle he follows is: if someone offends me, I won't offend them. If someone offends me, I will offend them. But whether in school or in society, he found that his own system was simply impossible to implement. After hitting the southern wall several times and putting on a face of praise, his purpose in dealing with people and things became the first half of the sentence. As for the second half, although he cannot follow the rules, he can still be a pure spiritual winner like AQ. In the small and rotten foreign trade company where Zou Yan works, there are only 7 employees except for Zou Yan. Among these 7 demons and monsters, except for the boss's wife and Xiaomei in charge of procurement, the remaining 4 are either the boss's confidants or relatives of the leaders who can manage the boss. Only Zou Yan was alone, like a white swan standing in a flock of bald chickens, appearing both awkward and eye-catching. Perhaps this is Zou Yan's original sin, originating from a small place and being too kind. He believed that hard work would always pay off, and so he naturally became the busiest and least earning big fool in their company. Chapter 2. Mortgage Loans. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zou Yan, who is at the bottom of the food chain, has been struggling every day. He cares too much about the faces of others. The more he does, the more mistakes he makes. When things are done well, someone will come out to ask for credit. If things go wrong, he will become the scapegoat for everyone in the company. He lived this kind of life for a long time until the end of the world came and he was on the brink of death. It was only then that he suddenly realized that he was able to take this step all because of himself. Looking at those former colleagues, disregarding his pleadings and cries, they cut the flesh from his chest one by one and stuffed it into their mouths. Okay. Zou Yan. Don't call anymore. If you call again like that, it will attract everyone else. The landlady greedily licked the blood at the corner of her mouth as she tried to calm Zou Yan's emotions, which were about to collapse. Don't cry. Don't cry. When you cry, your meat becomes sour and doesn't taste good anymore. Boss Wang Zhe muttered softly while carrying a very dirty big bowl and squeezing toward Zou Yan. After the end of the day, these surviving people generally became as thin as a stick. Even a chubby man like Wang Zhe, weighing 200 pounds, now only has over 60 pounds left. Wang Zhe helped himself with his glasses and said to Zou Yan with a gloomy expression, "In ancient times, the Buddha used his body to feed tigers. Every one of us knows that Zou Yan has a good heart. I think he wouldn't mind if we all ate him, would he? After all, it's better to die than starve to death for all of us." Zou Yan started the car and drove it to the entrance of Xinshin Financial Company in Binhai City. This is a high-interest loan company famous for its high interest rates and ruthless collection methods in Binhai City. This time, Zou Yan came here to borrow money from them. In the previous life, Zou Yan, like many others, was unprepared for the impending end of the world. In this life, Zou Yan does not intend to repeat his previous mistakes. He needs to hoard enough food and build unparalleled shelters. Only in this way can he witness with his own eyes the painful deaths of his colleagues and classmates who once caused him death in endless cold and hunger. To achieve all of this, a large amount of money is needed. But where does this money come from? Zou Yan was already very poor. He had neither family background nor background. After his parents passed away, he only left behind an old and dilapidated house in the bustling city of Binhai. Although Binhai City is a first-tier super-large city, how much money can an old and dilapidated house mortgage? Zou Yan found the property registration for the house from the glove box of the pickup truck. This morning, he spoke to this finance company on the phone. The owner of the company's surname is Wu. He heard that Zou Yan has a house in the bustling city of Binhai that can be mortgaged. He quickly agreed to Zou Yan's loan request. "Brother, you need to know that we are a very legitimate financial company. The 5 million loan you applied for can only be granted to you after you have completed the corresponding procedures. When do you think you can come to my office to handle the mortgage procedures?" Zou Yan is very anxious. After all, there are only 3 months left until the end of the world. During this period, he needed to purchase a lot of things, but now he only has less than 100,000 yuan in savings on hand. And this 100,000 yuan also includes an 80,000 yuan deposit receipt handed over to him by his father before his death. This 80,000 yuan deposit certificate was the money his father prepared for him to marry a wife. The remaining 20,000 yuan was saved by him after working for 3 years. A bitter smile appeared at the corner of Zou Yan's mouth. He remembered that on his father's deathbed, he used his dry and trembling hands to write some crooked and unrecognizable words on a white paper. Looking at his father's reluctant gaze, Zou Yan finally couldn't contain his surging emotions and burst into tears. The paper with his father's dying words written on it has always been kept in Zou Yan's wallet. Due to the passage of time, that piece of paper has curled up and turned yellow, while the words on it are still clearly visible. "Son. Don't be sad. You must live well." Zou Yan opened the car door and walked quickly into the glass door of Xinshin Financial Company. Mr. Wu, the boss of a financial company, is a rough middle-aged man with a shaved head and 2 flower arms tattooed on a large gold chain. "Are you Manager Wu?" If in the past, Zou Yan would have been scared by this Manager Wu. After being reborn, Zou Yan is no longer the timid Zou Yan. He is used to seeing life and death, and of course, he has also been killed by others. "Is that Mr. Zou?" Manager Wu saw Zou Yan coming in and quickly ordered his subordinate sitting next to him to pour tea for the customer. "Mr. Zou is really punctual." Manager Wu smiled and shook hands with Zou Yan, then asked him to sit down on the sofa. "I work in a financial company and rely on good credit. Therefore, I am most willing to do business with people who are trustworthy." Manager Wu approached Zou Yan closely while carefully examining his attire. He often teaches his subordinates a lesson, saying that a person's potential can be seen from their clothing and appearance. That is to say, whether a person has money or can become their target customer, he doesn't need to ask, he can see it with his eyes alone. Mr. Zou. Have you brought the property certificate? Boss Wu saw that Zou Yan was dressed in ordinary clothes and knew that he must have encountered some kind of difficulty when he came to borrow money. Zou Yan didn't answer, he just took out the property certificate from his pocket and handed it to Mr. Wu. Mr. Wu took the property certificate and frowned as he flipped it over. The location of the house is good. But it's a bit old. Of course. I'm not saying it, you know very well that even if you want to sell this house, it won't sell for much. As soon as Zou Yan entered, Mr. Wu, the boss of the finance company, was keen to see that Zou Yan belonged to the kind of leeks that could be harvested casually. As for leeks, they naturally had the same treatment as leeks. Originally, we agreed to borrow 5 million yuan. But I don't think the value of your house meets our company's loan regulations. Do you think we can borrow less? And you can't make it difficult for me, brother. Didn't we all discuss it over the phone? Zou Yan asked coldly, with no expression of anger on his face. Manager Wu chuckled and said, it was agreed upon. But you didn't sell me this house. You're a mortgage. You'll have money to redeem in the future. Lending 5 million is too much, isn't it? I'm in business, so you have to make me a little profit, right? How much do you think you can lend me? Zou Yan knew that Wu Jing Ideal was going to play tricks on him. He understood that his house located in the city center, although it was old and dilapidated, was worth 7 or 8 million yuan anyway. This bald man clearly wanted to take advantage of the situation. I didn't discuss it with him. I borrowed chapter 3 but didn't want to repay it. You are listening at novelfull.audio. According to the condition of your house, I can only lend you 4 million now. As for whether you borrow it or not, it's up to you. As he spoke, Manager Wu crossed his legs and leaned comfortably against the back of the sofa. All right. I think you shouldn't hesitate. We haven't mortgaged your house before. It's said to be worth 8 or 9 million. But someone has to buy it, right? Your house now belongs to the type of house with value but no market. Customers like Zou Yan and Manager Wu have seen many of them. They are very familiar with the psychology of such customers, so they are often able to prescribe the right medicine to maximize their own benefits. But I really need these 5 million. Zou Yan showed a sincere expression. I know you're in a hurry. But there's nothing you can do about it. I can lend this house 4 million from here. That's already my limit. After all, we're in business. You also have to give us some interest, right? Manager Wu sat up straight and explained. How can you lend me 5 million? Zou Yan still refuses to let go. At this moment, Manager Wu realized that the person who came today seemed different from all the people who came to borrow money in the past. His face remained calm like a robot. Damn it. This kid can't be a facial paralysis, can he? I've said that, but he still has this expression of wanting to be beaten. This makes me a bit confused about his pulse. What exactly is this kid thinking? Manager Wu felt a bit confused in his heart. As he picked up the tea cup on the table and took a sip of tea, he stared at Zou Yan's eyes with a smile on his face and said, Do you have any other property? As long as you have other property to mortgage. Not to mention 5 million. Even 10 million, I dare to lend it to you. Zou Yan sneered and threw a property certificate to Mr. Wu. You take a look. You still have a house, don't you say? Okay. I'll lend you 5 million yuan. But let's talk about it first. We have to calculate the loan interest rate at 15% for you. The loan term is 3 months. I won't charge you any loan fees. Because the end of the world is coming in another month, Zou Yan has no intention of repaying the money, let alone paying interest. That is to say, what Boss Wu wants is Zou Yan's interest and the house, but Zou Yan wants Boss Wu's principal. Wait. Isn't this your house either? How does the name on the property certificate say, Wang Zai? Who is this Wang Zai? Mr. Wu was about to get up to pick up the contract, but he was confused by the property certificate that Zou Yan handed over. Aren't you lying? You didn't do things like that. Boss Wu was very angry and forgot to even take the contract. In a fit of anger, he threw the problematic property certificate onto the table in front of Zou Yan. How much do you think this house can be worth? Zou Yan didn't panic at all. He crossed his legs and sipped hot tea. How much this house is worth has something to do with you. Look clearly. The name on the property certificate is Wang Zai. You can't mortgage Wang Zai's house with me. Even if you're Wang Zai's father. Coincidentally. You're really right. This Wang Zai is my son, and I am his father. Zou Yan interrupted Mr. Wu's words and explained to him seriously. What are you doing? His surname is Wang. Your surname is Zou. How could he be his father? You can't be so perfunctory when you cheat on loans, can you? All right. Don't mess around with me here. Are you willing to borrow from me? I'll lend you 4 million. What if you don't want to? Take your things. The door is over there. Take your time. I won't see you off. Zou Yan smiled and stared into Mr. Wu's eyes without fear. Kid. Why are you laughing? Are you still trying to deceive me? You're not going out to inquire. Who am I, Wu Yu? Wu Yu was completely annoyed, he thought Zou Yan was here to deceive him. Who's lying to you? Look at what this is. Zou Yan took out 2 more things from his pocket and patted them on the table. Is everything ready now? With your background in this industry, transferring this house to someone else's name shouldn't be a difficult task, right? This is the owner's ID card. This is his household registration book. With these 2 things, what are you afraid of? This house is over 200 square meters in total. The market price is at least over 20 million. I'll borrow 1 million from you with it. Isn't that too much? Even if the owner really comes to you afterwards, it won't be difficult for you to get back this 1 million from him, right? Zou Yan grabbed 3 things from the table and shook them vigorously in front of Wu Yu's eyes. With a slightly mocking smile, he said, if you want to get rich, you have to be ruthless and seize opportunities. Just like you, being a small boss in this life is the end of your life. Little bunny. Who are you talking about? Do you believe that with just 1 word from me, you can never borrow a penny from the seaside? Wu Yu's face turned black with anger. With a gloomy expression, he waved his hand to the few little brothers who had barged in outside and said, it's none of your business. Who let you in? As soon as those little brothers showed their heads, they were kicked out by Wu Yu. Zou Yan sat on the sofa and sneered, what's wrong? Are you so many brothers afraid that I won't pay you back? Wu Yu stared at Zou Yan's calm face and sneered eerily, kid. Listen to me. I can lend you money. But if you play tricks with me, I'll cut you alive. Do you understand? After Wu Yu handed the bank card with 5 million yuan in cash to Zou Yan forcefully took a photo of Wu Yu with him in the lobby of the company. Before leaving the glass door of Xinxin Company, Zou Yan had already posted the photo he took with Wu Yu on the company's business group. Zou Yan got into the car, while Wu Yu was smoking a cigarette and warning him, kid, your loan term is only 3 months. If you don't pay back then, don't blame me for taking your house. Zou Yan withdrew the group photo posted in the work group and assured Wu Yu, don't worry. We'll do everything according to the rules then. Then, he drove the car to a lottery shop very close to his workplace, where he spent 2 yuan to buy a lottery ticket. Zou Yan remembers that in his past life, he also bought lottery tickets from this lottery store, so he still remembers the exact winning number of that lottery. The total prize money for the first prize of that lottery was 10 million, and after deducting personal income tax, he would receive a prize of 8 million. If everything goes smoothly, then he will have a total of 13.1 million yuan of working capital available for him to mobilize at any time. For Zou Yan, who urgently needs to store a large amount of food and build a shelter for the end of the world, this amount of money is like a drop in the bucket for him. Chapter 4. Colleagues in the company. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. He needs more money, but where can he find it? Zou Yan returned to the company and unloaded the vegetables he bought today from the car. Chef Lao Wang heard the sound and walked out of the kitchen with a big teapot and a smiling face. Oh! Isn't this Xiao Zou? He came back from the market so quickly. Chef Lao Wang is about 40 or 50 years old, with a chubby face shining with oil, and a faint oil stain remaining on his white chef uniform. Master Wang. I bought the item for you. Do you think where would be suitable for me to put it? Let's leave it here. Let's leave it here for a while. Xiaomei can also tidy up easily. Chef Lao Wang was like a pig, smacking at his two thick big lips, pulling his head out of his large teapot, and then pointing towards the corner of the kitchen with one of his chubby fingers. Zou Yan had a smile on his face, but he held a murderous knife in his heart. He didn't want to help, but when he saw the haughty and domineering look of Chef Lao Wang, Zou Yan was furious. What's your aura? Aren't you just relying on your sister? If it weren't for your sister supporting you, I would definitely have defecated you. Zou Yan shook the rain off his body and obediently placed all the dishes he bought today in the corner of the wall. Where's Xiaomei? Why didn't she come today? There are only two people in the company kitchen, one is fat chef Wang Diji, and the other is Xiaomei. Xiaomei is a Hunan girl who is bold and hardworking. Due to her good development, as a girl from the countryside, when she arrived at their company, she caught the attention of all the male employees in the company. Chef Wang Diji is certainly one of them. The problem is that Wang Diji is not only married, but also has 2 children. But he didn't want to let Xiaomei go. He took advantage of every opportunity to harass her. Xiaomei was also relentlessly fighting against him. This incident alarmed the company's boss and the boss's wife. Just when everyone thought that the cook Wang Diji was going to be unlucky, Xiaomei was dragged into the office by the boss's wife and criticized for a long time. Later, for some unknown reason, whenever Wang Diji met Xiaomei, he trembled with fear. Everyone thought it was the boss's criticism and education that played a role, but Zou Yan heard another version of the story from Xiaomei's mouth. Zou Yan and Xiaomei both belong to the bottom of this company, so they both sympathize with each other. Once, Zou Yan went to the kitchen to get something and saw Xiaomei bending down to wipe the kitchen utensils. To be honest, Xiaomei is not beautiful, but her curvy figure and snow-white chest made Zou Yan dizzy for half a minute. Hey! Zou Yan! Why did you come? Xiaomei stood up straight, wiping the sweat off her face. Zou Yan took something and looked around, then whispered to her, "Have all the problems been solved?" Xiaomei's face was flushed, like the red apples hanging on the treetops in autumn. Solved. Zou Yan was surprised. He furrowed his eyebrows and continued asking, "Isn't that old witch going to open you up?" Xiaomei chuckled and lifted her skirt, showing Zou Yan what was underneath her skirt. Zou Yan was startled and in a hurry, only saw her wearing a black lace triangle shorts and 2 round and sturdy big white legs. Where the hell are you looking? Xiaomei saw that Zou Yan had been staring at her lower body, so she quickly chuckled and covered her skirt. Zou Yan's face immediately turned red as he turned his head to the side and explained, "I didn't see." Really? I didn't see anything. Xiaomei's face turned even redder at this moment. She reached under her skirt and pulled out a sharp knife from underneath. Do you see? This is my weapon. Who dares to bully me again? I'll use this knife to stab them to death. Xiaomei is Zou Yan's only friend in this company, but unfortunately, after the end of the world, Xiaomei was taken hostage by those people in the company. Ask her why. That crazy woman. She's better off dying outside. Fatty Wang Deji spat out the tea foam in his mouth while muttering curses and curses. It's damp outside, and looking out from the kitchen window, you can see the reflective rainwater in the yard. Zou Yan followed the stairs to the second floor, where everyone in the office was discussing the continuous rain for several months. Xiaomei stood at her workstation and complained to Wang Xiaofei in a coquettish voice, "When will the rain stop? I have a lot of fur hanging in my wardrobe. These days, it's almost hairy." "Who said it's not? I heard it's raining all over the world. It's pretty good here. The news says that Argentina has been flooded all over." Wang Xiaofei has long hair and a certain artistic temperament. However, although he looks handsome and free-spirited on the outside, he is actually just a jerk with a beautiful face. This can be seen from his ambiguous relationship with Xiaomei and frequent interactions with other women. "Yo! Isn't this our busy person Zou Yan?" Xiaomei flashed her big eyes with fake eyelashes and shouted at Zou Yan, "By the way. You just came back from outside. Can you introduce everyone to the specific situation outside?" Zou Yan stopped and looked around at the colleagues sitting at the workstations. "Yeah. You're going out on your own today. Just tell everyone. What's going on outside now?" Wang Xiaofei is now putting aside her previous arrogance and humbly seeking advice. Zou Yan scratched the back of his head and said, "We're doing okay here. This time I went out, except for seeing that Xianghe Road was flooded. There's no problem with the rest of the city now. You guys look. The phone says the world is currently experiencing an unprecedented climate disaster. Do you think? After this rain, the world will enter the Ice Age." As soon as Zou Yan finished speaking, Li Jiang raised his phone and shouted at everyone. With a shout, everyone gathered around Li Jiang, eager to watch a foreign meteorologist's speech in the video on Li Jiang's phone. Why isn't this video translated? What exactly is this old man talking about? Xiaomei stared at Li Jiang's phone and asked Wang Xiaofei standing beside her. Wang Xiaofei took advantage of the chaos and patted Xiaomei's buttocks, then proudly said, "Don't you understand? This old man is speaking German. He said that after this continuous heavy rain, the earth will cool down quickly. Perhaps the ancient ice age will soon come." After watching this video, everyone was discussing it. Xiaomei turned her head in the crowd and asked Zou Yan, "Do you know Mr. Wu from Xinxin Financial Company?" Zou Yan deliberately pretended to be surprised and asked her back, "How do you know?" Xiaomei smiled seductively and said, "Didn't you just post a group photo in the work group? I'm not blind. That's my buddy. He happened to have a big money-making project recently." Zou Yan blinked his eyes and deliberately didn't say everything, waiting for Xiaomei to jump into the pit on her own. Chapter 5. Xiaomei's Midnight Phone Call. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zou Yan knows that Xiaomei has a deep plan. In the company, besides the boss and the boss's wife, she is the one who counts. Even Wang Deji's sister downstairs, the sales manager Dehima Chunhua, who enjoys cursing, has to avoid her. If you want to trick her into the jar, Zou Yan has to leave no trace. Yo! I don't see. Our model worker still has such social relations. Xiaomei blinked her eyes and leaned her entire body over. Zou Yan pretended to be embarrassed and shrank back, saying, "Look at what you said. Who doesn't have many acquaintances in this society?" Zou Yan actually despised this woman in his heart. He felt that she was like a carnivorous animal, and wherever there was a bloody smell, she would appear. Xiaomei exudes a very peculiar perfume smell, which Zou Yan once smelled before she died in her previous life. "What perfume do you wear? It smells so good." Zou Yan asked in surprise. Xiaomei smugly sniffed her nose and chuckled lightly, is it fragrant? Why didn't I smell it? Zou Yan smiled and left Xiaomei to return to his workstation. Obviously, Xiaomei didn't intend to just let Zou Yan go like this. She keenly felt that Zou Yan seemed to be hiding something from her. I said, Zou Yan, your behavior is not interesting enough. We are both colleagues for such a long time, what else can't you tell me? Xiaomei was lying on Zou Yan's desk, deliberately pulling down her collar. Actually, it's not much. Mainly my buddy. He doesn't let me tell others. You're such a crazy person. Don't you even think about it, sister. Am I someone else? You're such a heartless person. Sister, how much have I been worried about you over the years? Last time my brother Law wanted to drive you away. Was it because I begged you to stay? What's going on? You forgot all about it so quickly. Xiaomei is right. She did plead for him in front of the boss last time. But how can Zou Yan be blamed for that matter? Clearly, he's also a victim, okay. Zou Yan remembers that he only wrote a wrong number on the customs declaration last time. This kind of thing is very common in the company, and usually he just criticizes and corrects it. But I don't know how Zou Yan touched the bosses back then. The boss insisted on firing Zou Yan. Actually, Zou Yan didn't want to work here for a long time, but he didn't understand why he had to be fired for making a small mistake after making so many contributions to the company. Is this too unfair? Let's take Wang Xiaofei as an example. Which month doesn't he make such mistakes a few times? Why didn't the boss also dismiss him? You're stupid. Do you know how Wang Xiaofei came to our company? It was his uncle who greeted our boss. Do you know who his uncle is? Who is it? Is it a related account of our company? Do you have such a backing? Xiaomei asked aggressively with her waist crossed. How could I have it? If I had it, I wouldn't have mixed up like this, would I? Zou Yan reluctantly spread out his hand, thinking about the lawsuit. Xiaomei shook her head helplessly as she looked at him and said, you can't do this. If you continue like this, one day you will be bullied to death by them. So, think about it. What did you do a few days ago? Did something offend our boss? Zou Yan rubbed his hands and said that he had not even seen the boss in person these days, let alone offend him. Xiaomei didn't believe it and forced Zou Yan to think carefully again. Zou Yan squatted on the ground, searching for memories for a while, and finally remembered the scene he saw when he suddenly returned to work the day before yesterday to get the key. What have you seen? I saw our boss coming out of the office with Xiaomei. I was in a hurry to get the key. So I didn't take this matter to heart. Looking back now, I always feel that their expressions were a bit unnatural. What did you say to them back then? I didn't say anything. I just asked them. Why are they still working so late? Oh no, the boss must have thought you were mocking him. Mocking him? Why should I mock him? You idiot. Don't you know that Xiaomei's relationship with our boss is very unusual? Everyone in the company knows about this, and it's just kept from our boss's wife. You're joking with him like this. Can he not hate you? How did I know? I thought they were working overtime at the company. You made a big mistake, you know. What should we do then? Zou Yan was both aggrieved and sad at this moment. He never expected that he would be implicated in the boss's extramarital affair. Don't worry about this matter. I will help you handle it. But there's one thing, don't say you've told me about it. If the boss asks you, you just say you don't know anything. Understand? It has to be said that Xiaomei is really a heroine among women. Not long after Zou Yan told Xiaomei about this, the boss's tight, buttocks-like round face finally showed a rare smile at Zou Yan. Although he laughed very eerily, it also showed Zou Yan the turning point of things. Xiao Zou. I heard that both of your parents have passed away. Have you been renting a house alone all along? It's really not easy. As a dedicated employee like you, our company must vigorously promote it. By the way, what is your salary now? It's too little, too little. This month. I'll give you a raise. The boss, with a big belly, made a wish in front of Zou Yan and then returned to his office. Before Zou Yan could relish it, Xiaomei quietly came over to use his words. Xiaomei first probed whether Zou Yan knew about her relationship with the boss, and then asked him if he had any friends on the road. Zou Yan remembered Xiaomei's words and pretended to be silly throughout the whole process. He always pretended not to know anything Xiaomei asked. Until the end, Xiaomei felt that she couldn't find anything valuable from Zou Yan anymore. She then pretended and said to Zou Yan, "Actually, the boss values you very much. Haven't you heard about the depth of love and the severity of responsibility? This time, you must not have any psychological burden. Do your job well. I will help you speak up to the boss." Later on, Zou Yan realized that the incredible turning point of things was due to the boss receiving a threatening phone call that night. As for what was said on the phone, no one in the company knows. But Zou Yan suspected that the person who called the boss in the middle of the night was Xiaomei. Chapter 6. Inviting the Emperor into the urn and grasping old lady Go. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Zou Yan then pretended to be very difficult and carefully explained to Xiaomei, Xinshin Financial Company has recently received a big order. You should know what kind of business their company does, right? As long as you can lend out money in their industry, you can earn a lot of money. This time, a big shot board came to borrow money. I heard that the big boss is going to invest in building an industrial park in our Binhai city. The approval has been received. The funds are only 200 million. Just my buddy, his company lent the big boss 1 billion. But there is still a billion yuan funding gap that cannot be solved. Is that right? I borrowed all the savings from my relatives. Will you promise me that he would not only return the principal to me when the loan was due, but also pay me interest at a rate of 25%? Such high interest. He won't deceive you, will he? Xiaomei's eyes suddenly lit up, then filled with doubts. How could that be possible? That kid was my childhood friend. Many of my relatives know him. See. This is the money I lent. There was 5.1 million in this card alone. Of which 5 million was borrowed by me and my relatives after begging my grandparents for help. The remaining 100,000 is my own savings. Zou Yan took out the bank card with a deposit of 5.1 million from his pocket and shook it in front of Xiaomei. Xiaomei blinked her eyes, still expressing moderate suspicion. You can just boast. You're still investing in the development zone. Don't you see how long it's been raining outside? Zou Yanjian didn't believe Xiaomei, so she had to offer her own trump card. If you don't believe me, you can. Then you can't just believe in the Chinese yuan, right? I'll check for you on my phone and let you see if there's any money in my account. Whether I'm lying to you or not. Speaking, Zou Yan used his phone to check the balance of his bank card and showed it to Xiaomei. Xiaomei saw that there was indeed a huge sum of 5.1 million yuan in Zou Yan's bank card, and she couldn't help but look at Zou Yan differently and no longer doubt what he said. So, after the loan contract expires, you will receive a large amount of interest. When speaking these words, Zou Yan noticed a greedy glint in Xiaomei's eyes. There. I was just doing a favor for my friend. Zou Yan ended his conversation with Xiaomei in a timely manner. He was like an experienced lover, with enough patience waiting for Xiaomei to fall into the trap. Sorry. I have to go out for a while. Zou Yan stood up from his workstation, took an umbrella, and walked towards the door. Zou Yan. It's still raining outside. Where are you going? Xiaomei's shout came from behind Zou Yan. Zou Yan didn't answer, he just waved at Xiaomei. The rain is still falling endlessly. The clouds in the sky are as heavy as an extremely heavy piece of lead, pressing down on the sky above the city. Zou Yan drove his car across the entire coastal city and braved the drizzle to return to his old house. Zou Yan's past home was on the second floor of Building 95 in Xianhe Community, Puneng District. This is an old urban area that has not been demolished. Amidst the dense web of declining and dilapidated dark gray buildings, and in the narrow and dark corridors filled with various small advertisements, Zou Yan seems to have found a trace of warmth from family. Zou Yan parked his car downstairs and sat there for a long time, gazing at his own window on the second floor. He remembers when his dad was still alive, every time he came back, he would see him standing at the window waiting for him. Zou Yan sighed, opened the car door, and ran upstairs in the rain. Opening the long-lost door, Zou Yan felt like entering the vortex of memories. Everything in the room, every scratch on the wall, is telling Zou Yan about the memories of the past year. After being reborn, Zou Yan only knew that he wanted to build an apocalyptic shelter, but where exactly should this apocalyptic shelter be built? Should it be built on an uninhabited wasteland or in densely populated cities? In order to survive for a long time in the apocalypse, it is necessary to have a stable source of food and clean drinking water. After the apocalypse, food can only be found in the city. Therefore, after careful consideration, Zou Yan finally decided to build a shelter downstairs from his house. There is now a small supermarket downstairs from his house, and the owner of the supermarket is an old lady with a black face and wandering eyes. This old lady Zou Yan happens to know her, and he knows that this old lady is a notorious greedy old lady who loves small gains around her. Mrs. Go. Do you still recognize me? Zou Yan walked into the supermarket and asked an old lady with a hooked nose sitting behind the cash register. Mrs. Go lifted her head in surprise. Her murky, lifelike eyes lingered on Zou Yan's face for a while, and then she cracked her loose lips and said hoarsely, "Who should I be?" "So it's you. How are you, old lady? Are you okay?" Zou Yan leaned against the counter, trying to get close to old lady Go. Mrs. Go glanced at the clothes on Zou Yan's body and said, "What's wrong?" "I'm not in good health. Can you still help me take care of my illness?" Zou Yan smiled, not surprised that the old lady would treat him like this. Because although the two families are neighbors, they can respect the behavior of the old lady's family. Zou Yan used to disdain to deal with them. "Madam. Has your girl come back to see you?" Zou Yan saw that the old lady was unhappy and immediately changed the topic to something that could make her happy. Sure enough, when she mentioned her daughter, Mrs. Go's sharp and sarcastic face was instantly filled with pride. "If you're talking about my girl, then you're far behind. What car are you driving now?" "The car parked outside is the one you're driving." "How did you buy a domestic car?" "My girl drives a BMW. Mrs. Go looked at Zou Yan with a proud expression on her face, hoping to see jealousy and envy on his face. But she was disappointed, and Zou Yan's face had no waves, as if he had not heard anything. "Did you see this? This is what my son-in-law bought for me." Mrs. Go is a bit angry. Since their family started to prosper, everyone living nearby has greeted her with a smile. However, today she revealed her magic weapon, but it was ignored by Zou Yan. For Mrs. Go, who has always been arrogant, it is simply unbearable for her uncle and aunt. Mrs. Go rolled up her sleeves and put 2 heavy gold bracelets on her wrist. "Do you know what my son-in-law does? He runs a company." Zou Yan knew that the old lady Go in front of him was not an ordinary person. He had grown up here since childhood and knew more or less about the people living nearby. Chapter 7. Mrs. Go. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Decades ago, Mrs. Go and her family made a fortune by setting up stalls selling fruits in the market. As for the means of getting rich, it is to use less to make more, and to use inferior to make good. Not only did they deceive people they didn't know, but also their neighbors who looked up and down every day, and they followed suit without fail. Those who were angry but couldn't go back to look for them, their old lady Go all rolled around and scolded them back. Gradually, the neighbors around them all knew their family's character, so everyone seemed to have agreed not to go to her house to buy fruits. What drove their business to the end was the gradual rise of various fruit supermarkets in the old city area. The fruits in the fruit supermarket are not only diverse in variety and cheap in price, but also rarely short in weight. Mrs. Go's fruit stall can no longer rely on deception and ruthlessness to make money, so their family turned to the retail industry and soon opened a supermarket downstairs in Zou Yan's house. After so many years of not coming back, Zou Yan doesn't know if this hated Mrs. Go's temper has changed or not. He just came to find Mrs. Go and didn't come specifically to listen to him show off. Zou Yan wants to take over Mrs. Go's shop, but as for how to negotiate, it's just a technical question. My son-in-law drives a Hummer. I heard he said it's worth at least 3 million yuan. What kind of car are you driving? Where do you work now? How much money can you earn in a month? Faced with Mrs. Go's barrage of questions, Zou Yan had to lower his posture and follow her, saying, I am currently working in a foreign trade company. My salary is only average. By the way, who is your son-in-law? What company is he running? You won't know him. He's a big boss. The people he interacts with are all at the level of high-ranking officials and big bosses. You. Just like your father, you're not a promising person. Although Zou Yan was still smiling on his face, his heart had already resented the powerful old lady in front of him. Since his rebirth, he has vowed to live well and make those who look down on him go to hell. Mrs. Go, seeing Zou Yan's forced smile, knew that what she had just said had offended Zou Yan. If you offend me, then offend me. What else can he do to me, this old lady? Judging from his appearance, he doesn't seem to be doing well either. If he really dares to get into trouble with me, I'll have my son-in-law bring a few people. Scare him well. Thinking of this, Mrs. Go finally let go of her worries. In order to be brave just in case, she quickly told Zou Yan about her son-in-law's prestigious name. Do you know the boss of Xinshin Financial Company? That's my son-in-law. Upon hearing Mrs. Go's words, Zou Yan couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. Do you want it to be so coincidental? His son-in-law is actually Wu Yu. It's really like birds of a feather flock together. What kind of people play with birds? Thinking of this, Zou Yan deliberately pretended to be respectful and said, Yo. So he's your son-in-law. Aren't you waiting for his fortune? Zou Yan was complimenting Mrs. Go while pondering how to talk to her about the store operation. To be honest, Zou Yan didn't want to see Mrs. Go's disgusting face at all. But the situation is stronger than human beings, and now there are only 3 months left until the end of the world. If he cannot quickly take down Mrs. Go, his plan for survival in the end of the world will face the risk of complete bankruptcy. I can't enjoy any good fortune. Although the girl is getting older now, I don't worry about money anymore, right? But I can't stand being idle all day. Well, opening such a small supermarket is not for making money, but to relieve boredom. Mrs. Go couldn't help feeling good when she saw that Zou Yan had been flattering her all along. She patted her chest and promised, when I have time that day, I'll introduce you to my son-in-law and get to know each other. Don't go to work either. If you follow him, I promise you'll earn much more than you do now. Zou Yan quickly took over Mrs. Go's words and said, Auntie, you don't have to worry about it. I'm not born to do anything. I think Auntie, your small shop is quite good. I just don't know if you can transfer your shop to me. Mrs. Go clearly did not expect that Zou Yan would actually take a liking to her small shop. Her eyes rolled and she felt like she had a chance to get rich. What do you mean? Do you want to cash in on my store? I don't earn much outside either. Overall, I might as well go home and open a shop, feeling comfortable. By the way, auntie. How much does it cost to rent a store for a year? How much do you want to pay for this house full of goods? Mrs. Go straightened her body, and when she heard the word money, she felt as if she had charged her battery, and instantly became full of energy. This house was rented by me from old Lou's hands. For a 5-year lease, this year is the 3rd year. This is all worth a lot of money. And my house is full of goods. My house is also worth more than 100,000 yuan, isn't it? And my store, whether it's for a year or not, has a net profit of over 100,000 yuan. If I transfer the store to you, the annual profit of over 100,000 yuan will become yours. We need to talk about this part carefully. Xiao Zou. We have to rely on our conscience as a person. Auntie, we should have such a good store. I transferred it to you. Can't you compensate for your aunt's loss properly? Zou Yan knew that there could be no truth in the mouth of the old woman in front of her. As long as it was related to money, she could do the most disgusting thing in the world by any means possible. Not to mention whether her small shop can earn over 100,000 yuan in profit per year, let's just say that her inventory here is definitely not as much as she said. Zou Yan looked around and knew she was asking exorbitant prices, but couldn't even consider bargaining. Would that work for you? Don't even say how much the goods in your house are worth. Don't even say how much you will earn less in the future. I'll offer a fixed price. What if you think it's okay? You can package and transfer this small shop as a whole to me. If you don't think it's okay, I'll go to Mr. Su's store across the street and ask. Anyway, there's not only one supermarket on this street. How much do you plan to spend? Mrs. Go stood up and asked with bright eyes. 200,000. That's all I can offer. Zou Yan saw that Mrs. Go's eyes suddenly narrowed into a slit, and he realized that his price was too high. Okay. Let's make a deal. Here is my mobile payment code. Could you please transfer the money now? Speaking, Mrs. Go reached out her phone to Zou Yan. Don't you go back and discuss with your family. To be honest, Zou Yan feels a bit sore at this moment. The huge sum of 5.1 million yuan in his card is precious to him every minute. No need. I can take control of this matter. You can transfer 200,000 yuan to me now. This supermarket is yours. Zou Yan hesitated for a moment, but with a final grit of his teeth and a glare, he still handed over 200,000 yuan to Mrs. Go. Mrs. Go saw that the 200,000 yuan on her phone had already been credited, so she picked up the coat draped on the back of the chair and happily waved at Zou Yan, saying, "Since you have paid, then this shop belongs to you. There is still more than 100 yuan in the cash register, and I don't want it anymore. If there is anything you don't understand, please call me again." Chapter 8. Doomsday Security Company. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Watching Mrs. Go's body no longer hunched and her face covered in open folds, Zou Yan felt a lot of pain in his heart. After seeing off Mrs. Go, he pulled down the rolling shutter door at the store entrance. Then Zou Yan sat on a chair and gave a haircut to Li Jing from the Doomsday Security Company in Binhai City. While waiting for Manager Li to come over, Zou Yan opened his psychic space and stored everything in the supermarket in his own space. Zou Yan roughly estimated that all the goods in Mrs. Go's supermarket would not add up to more than 100,000 yuan. It seems that he took over a supermarket with less than 100,000 yuan of inventory for 200,000 yuan, and the transfer price is also too expensive. Just as he was stunned, 2 car horns outside interrupted his thoughts. Zou Yan opened the rolling shutter door and let in Manager Li of the Doomsday Company, who was standing at the door and was about to get wet. I said, "Mr. Zou. Why are you hiding here? You've caused me to search aimlessly." Manager Li's name is Li Zhihao, a second-generation wealthy man who studied abroad in the United States and was deeply influenced by the post-apocalyptic culture of the United States. As soon as he returned to China, with the support of his parents, he started the first post-apocalyptic security company in China in Bincheng. Are you manager Li Haozhe? Zou Yan shook Li Haozhe's hand and said, are all the things you promote on the website true? Li Haozhe also politely smiled at Zou Yan and said, then you must be able to afford it. Zou Yansong opened his hand and pointed to the bottom floor shop that had already been cleaned up by him, asking Li Haozhe, I am very pleased to see manager Li's real person. In the morning, we have reached an agreement on the price. But now I have raised a very impressive amount of funds. Since the funds are abundant, I want to make some changes to our plan. I think the A.type package of your company's Doomsday Fortress plan seems more suitable for my temperament. Li Haozhe is truly a genius in business. After being stunned for a second or two, he once again firmly grasped Zou Yan's hand and said, since Mr. Zou trusts our Doomsday security company so much, then our company will do our best to serve Mr. Zou. To show our company's sincerity. After the completion of the project, our company will waive all the installation costs of the monitoring systems included in the A.type package. And personally, as your friend, I also bring you an unexpected gift. If you confirm and decide, your total cost will be 1366 Yuan. I'm not sure if you want to pay by swiping your card now, or if you want to apply for a bank loan and pay in installments. Zou Yan summed it up and found out that there were still 4.9 million yuan left in his card. Even if the lottery ticket he bought really won, he would have to wait until Thursday of this week to redeem it. With this in mind, Zou Yan said to Li Haozhe, do you think this is okay? I'll pay you a deposit of 4 million first. You guys go ahead. On Sunday, I'll pay you the remaining 9 million. Do you think this is okay? Li Haozhe hesitated for a moment and immediately agreed to Zou Yan's payment method. In fact, Li Haozhe has been running this Doomsday company for a full 5 years, during which he has been involved in some small projects such as digging cellars and building houses. To be honest, the people of China seem to have no belief in the possibility of an end to the world. Whenever Li Haozhe suggests to his potential clients to build a small shelter in their villa or winery, those wealthy people will initially be polite and listen carefully to Li Haozhe's concerns about the uncertainty of the future world. But when they turn around and leave, they often whisper to their assistants or friends, this is definitely a fool. The setbacks in his career and people's lack of understanding once caused Li Haozhe to face collapse. Zou Yan is the first client he has received as a returning overseas student in his 5 years of work, willing to pay for the post-apocalyptic fortress he designed. You should know that when Li Haozhe received Zou Yan's phone call this morning, he thought someone was joking with him. It wasn't until Li Haozhe actually saw Zou Yan that he dared to believe everything was true. In fact, Li Haozhe's Doomsday company had already been deregistered, and he is currently living in his own father's company. However, these are not problems for him. From the moment he received Zou Yan's call, he had already decided to start the company again. Of course. Since it was Mr. Zou who took the initiative to find me, I absolutely believe in Mr. Zou's character. Zou Yan was naturally very happy to see Li Haozhe agreeing so happily. In fact, with his current amount of funds, even if he really won the $1 million prize on Thursday, he still has a funding gap of 700,000 yuan that cannot be solved. Where should I go to find the remaining 700,000? Zou Yan was worried as he deposited 4 million yuan into Li Haozhe's private account. I hope your company's construction personnel can be in place now. You know, every day before the end of the world is very precious to me. Li Haozhe understood and immediately called his engineering team. In no time, 3 workers wearing safety helmets drove a flatbed trailer to the construction site in the rain. Zou Yan saw that the workers were all in place, so he patted Li Haozhe's shoulder with satisfaction. I'll leave this matter to you. I have something else to do first. If there's anything here, you can call me. Li Haozha nodded and then waved to call all 3 workers over. Zou Yan stood at the entrance of the store, and the cat quickly rushed into the misty rain and mist outside the door with its waist down. As soon as he got into the car, he received a call from Xiaomei. Xiaomei first asked where he was on the phone, and then asked when he could come back. When she heard that he wouldn't come back tonight, she coquettishly asked Zou Yan on the phone, "Have your friend borrowed enough money? I happen to have 4 million yuan of free money here that I don't have any place to invest. Do you think you can help me invest it in your friend's place?" Upon hearing this, Zou Yan couldn't help but sneer inwardly. But Zou Yan cannot agree to her immediately, it will make her suspicious. No way. He has all the funds ready here. If you want to invest, wait for the next time. After saying these words, he hung up Xiaomei's phone without waiting for her to speak. Zou Yan drove to the door of Walmart's supermarket. As soon as he parked his car in the parking space, his phone rang again. He picked up his phone and saw that it was the landlady's phone number, so he quickly answered the call. "Hello. Is that the landlady?" Yes. I'm Xiao Zou." The boss's unique and delicate voice came over the phone. "It's Xiao Zou. I heard you're very familiar with Mr. Wu from Xinxin Financial Company." Chapter 9. Supermarket 0 Yuan Purchase. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Where? Boss, don't listen to Xiaomei's nonsense. Wu Yu and I are just ordinary friends. Zou Yan, you won't have a way to make money and just forget about us unrelated people, will you? I remember you, Xiao Zou, are not such a heartless person. Although Zou Yan couldn't see the expression on the boss's face at this moment, the image of the boss's big butt wearing a qipao couldn't be erased from his mind. No. Boss. Listen to me explain. Things are not like this. Alright. I won't listen to your explanation. As you know, our company is facing difficulties now. If you really have a good way to make money, don't forget me, sister. By the way, according to Xiaomei, Xinxin Financial Company's financing interest has been given 28%, right? If there is such a high interest, then I still have a sum of 10 million yuan here that I can temporarily lend to you for turnover. Zou Yan heard that the landlady also wanted to invest 10 million yuan in him, which was an unexpected joy for him. He originally only wanted to deceive the simple-minded Xiaomei, but now this matter is clearly a bit exaggerated. Although the landlady and Xiaomei are siblings, their social experiences are vastly different. Xiaomei can be said to be the representative of being silly and sweet, but if you want to say that she is foolish to the end, it is obvious that she is not foolish enough. She also knows that her relationship with her brother-in-law is not reliable, she is secretly making money in the company, and even got involved with Wang Xiaofei in the company. The boss's wife is completely different from her sister. She is 6 years older than her sister, so the boss's wife has more wrist and strength than her sister. The company's success to this day is not only due to the boss's long-sleeve dancing skills, but also to her shrewdness and competence. Zou Yan couldn't help but sit up straight, knowing that he was good enough to deceive Xiaomei. If you want to deceive the landlady together, it will still be difficult. Zou Yan pondered and dared not speak. He knew that the boss's wife had a wide range of friends, so he couldn't help but have the phone number of Mr. Wu from Xinxin Financial Company stored in her phone. No need for anything else. As long as she makes a phone call, all Zou Yan's lies will be exposed. What's wrong? Can't we? The landlady was clearly a bit angry on the other end of the phone. Even if you help me, can't you? So. You helped me with this matter. I'll promote you. But will the boss agree? Are you talking about Wang Zhe, that useless person? Ask him. If he didn't have his father, who else in this world would give him a serious look? Don't worry, he won't come to trouble you again from today on. To be honest, when Zou Yan first came to this company, he was shocked by the beauty and ugliness of the boss's wife and boss. Zou Yan is very strange that the boss's wife is such a beautiful woman. How could she marry such a short and bumpy playboy like the boss? He even fantasized about having an affair with the landlady, and this physiological impulse has persisted until now. You're joking. It's almost the end of the world before you promoted me. Why did you go so early? Zou Yan complained in his heart as he spoke of his conditions. I don't want to get promoted. I think I'm doing a good job. But recently my second uncle has been sick. His condition is very bad. You know my parents are not here. My second uncle is the only relative I have in this world. I have to go to the hospital to take care of him. I'll ask you for a month's leave. If you can approve my leave, I'll help you inquire about your relationship with Xiaomei. In fact, Zou Yan no longer needs to ask for leave from the boss's wife at this time. Compared to the end of the world, work is considered useless. The reason why Zou Yan still needs to go through the leave procedures seriously is to create a false impression that everything is under her control for the boss's wife. After hanging up the phone, Zou Yan looked at the raindrops sliding on the car window and vaguely thought, who in this world would have thought that this insignificant rain would become the prelude to the end of the world. In the crowded Walmart supermarket, in the turbulent flow of shoppers, Zou Yan, pale, walked against the current. During this process, he not only put on a hat to prevent others from recognizing him, but also covered his entire face with a mask. Zou Yan avoided the camera at the supermarket exit and swaggered into the supermarket. Before his rebirth, if it weren't for extreme cold and hunger, Zou Yan wouldn't have died. After his rebirth, Zou Yan did not lose his memory of his past life, so he had an almost paranoid possessiveness for all food. Zou Yan walked to the frozen meat area, and in front of everyone, he threw a whole frozen cow hanging on the shelf and more than 10 frozen sheep wrapped in plastic wrap into his own strange space. At that time, there were many people present, many of whom thought that Zou Yan was a magician hired by the manufacturer to promote products. Everyone saw that Zou Yan could transform the entire cow and sheep hanging on the shelf without any hands, and even cheered loudly. There was an old man in the crowd who looked like a cadre. He not only cheered loudly, but also pointed to a beautiful promotional lady wearing a super short skirt standing next to him and asked Zou Yan, "Can you make her disappear? If you can make her disappear, then I really admire you." When Zou Yan saw the old man say this, he knew that these onlookers mistook him for a performer hired by the store. After understanding this layer, Zou Yan simply came up with a trick. He took off his hat and bowed gracefully to the onlookers on the scene. Then he pulled up the ignorant promotional lady and threw her up hard, only to see her flash in the air and disappear. The onlookers were immediately stunned and all were suppressed. Even the most cheerful old man who just called had to extend his thumb and look at Zou Yan with admiration on his face. Several young girls even took pictures of the entire process of Zou Yan becoming a Miss Promoter on their mobile phones and sent them online with just one click. The title of the online hot search is, "There are many roles in Huaxia National Supermarket." A small promotional event that invited world-renowned magic masters. Live performances to transform people. Zou Yan was afraid of being recognized by others, so he took advantage of the onlookers taking photos and squeezed out of the crowd, covering his face. He quickly disappeared into the crowd. In order to avoid attracting the attention of others, Zou Yan had to wait until there was no one around him before opening his psychic space and packing items from the supermarket one by one into his psychic space. As for what he had put on, Zou Yan himself was not sure. Whether it's food or daily necessities, he never refuses to throw everything he can get into his own space, even the anti-towels used by women. He just sweeps away all the anti-towels on the shelf without leaving any. Chapter 10. Magician. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zou Yan's crazy Yuan shopping campaign lasted until the day before the end of the day. During this period, Zou Yan caused a total of over 1 billion yuan in losses to 38 supermarkets in the city, and official media in Huaxia claimed that Zou Yan's behavior seriously disrupted the production and living order of Binhai City. It should be severely cracked down on and will not be lenient. At this moment, Zou Yan was standing against the wall in his newly occupied shop, feeling completely speechless. He now understands that no matter how old she is, a bad person will never become a good person. At most, she will only become an old bad person. A few days ago, Zou Yan rented this shop from Mrs. Go for a high price of 200,000 yuan. He thought he had already suffered a loss, but this morning the arrival of the landlord, Mr. Sun, made him even more angry. The house has been dug into a mess, and a small excavator is still buzzing, digging out the soil one by one and dumping it outside. What are you doing? How did you make my house look like this? Lao Suntu clearly received a tip-off, so as soon as he arrived at the scene, he went straight to Zou Yan and shouted loudly at him. Old Sun, in his 70s and 30s, is short and has a red face. Although he is thin and small, he roars loudly. Zou Yan couldn't help but be startled by him, because his attention had just been on a video he wildly shared and liked on his social media. The shooter of the video is obviously not professional, and the phone camera keeps shaking. In the video, you can see many people. A young man wearing a duckbill cap and a mask on his face suddenly lifted a promotional lady standing next to him in front of everyone. However, what's even more eerie is that the promotional lady was thrown up by the young man, but suddenly disappeared. Zou Yan doesn't need to look closely, he knows that this video was secretly captured by someone using his phone more than 10 days ago when he was making a 0 yuan purchase at the supermarket. Zou Yan has now become the #1 celebrity in Binhai City, and online netizens call him a magician. Zou Yan clicked on the comments and found that there were already over 100,000 comments below this popular video. Wow! So this is the legendary magician. He looks so handsome. Sister. Could you please stop showing off your intelligence here and go offline? That guy has a mask on his face. How did you tell he's handsome? Oh my! How did he do it? The little sister who was lost by him wouldn't just disappear like this, would she? Everyone listen to me. This is definitely commercial hype. If I don't believe it, I will make an oath here. If I guess wrong, I am willing to eat xiang to thank the world. Do you want to do this? Are you too ruthless? No way. I'm going to vomit. But I still want to ask, is the xiang you're eating your own xiang or his xiang? Silly X, look at the announcement released by the Binhai Public Security Bureau on the internet today. This suspect, called Magic, has bought hundreds of millions of goods with 0 yuan in the major supermarkets in Binhai. This guy is powerful enough. I don't know how he stole so many things. Hee hee. With a case value of billions of yuan. Is this possible? Who can explain how a little thief stole goods worth billions of yuan? There's a big deal going on here. This kid's life is considered over. If he were caught, the value of this case would be enough to shoot him 800 times. Hey! Doesn't anyone care about the fate of that little sister? Do you think they might be accomplices? Don't talk nonsense. My buddy is from the task force. I heard him say that the girl had already been found. I heard that the girl was scared at the time. Hee hee. I thought they were a group. Now it seems like this guy is a lone wolf. I like this. There are also reports that this guy is highly likely to be a crazy pervert. It is said that the most lost items in many supermarkets are women's anti-scarves. Also, there have been many recent cases of theft of women's underwear in southern China. Some people say it was also this crazy pervert who did it. Zou Yan frowned when he saw this comment. He admitted that he was a bit desperate during the 0 yuan shopping event. But who can be blamed for that? You should know that in the future apocalypse, any material will be extremely scarce. Even the anti-towels used by women can play a huge role in the apocalypse that ordinary people cannot imagine. Zou Yan had used an ant's towel to stop bleeding in his previous life, and in extremely cold conditions, his feet are the most susceptible to frostbite. Ant's towel can also be used as a warm insole to prevent frostbite on his feet. But even if I take those anti-scarves, you can't just assume that I'm a pervert, can you? What kind of ghost is South China? You guys are too bullied, right? How could you even bully the South China region? The kind of bad thing that happened can also be attributed to me. Is there any reason behind it? At the moment when Zou Yan was feeling indignant, Old Sun had already stood in front of him with his teeth and claws wide open. Who asked you to dig? This is my house. You dug my house like this. Who told you to do this? Old Sun's eyes lit up, and his face turned pale with anger. Zou Yan was a bit confused when asked. He only knew that the landlord of the house he rented was an old man surnamed Sun, but he didn't know what the landlord really looked like. Wait a minute. Who are you? I spent 200,000 yuan to buy this house from Mrs. Go. Don't get excited. Speak slowly. What's going on here? As soon as Lao Sun Tu heard this, he became even more angry. That's something you and her have to do. I can't control it. This house is mine, and a few years ago I rented it to Mrs. Go. It's true. But next week, the lease agreement between me and her will expire. It looks like the lease is about to expire. But you've made my house look like this. How can you let me rent it out again in the future? Upon hearing Old Sun's words, Zou Yan couldn't help but feel a thump in his heart. He pulled Old Sun's head to the door, and the rain outside was still pouring. The exceptionally clean street, washed away by the rain, shimmered with water. After talking to Old Sun, Zou Yan finally understood that he had been deceived by the baseless old lady Go. Fortunately, he has abundant funds now. A few days ago, Xiaomei and the boss's wife transferred more than 10 million yuan to his account. Last Thursday, he also won the lottery he bought. The next day, he received a lottery prize of over 8 million yuan from the provincial sports lottery center. At this point, after he prepaid all the project funds for the Doomsday security company, his account surprisingly still had over 10 million yuan in savings. Grandpa Sunday, don't make a fuss here either. Let's not worry about the old lady anymore. I'll give you 200,000 yuan. Let's sign a new contract now, and you can rent the house to me again, won't it be over?